Surprised to see me? Well, believe me, I wasn't expecting to be back here either. It's too bad it looks like all the money from the Godzilla well has dried up, and I've got crippling debt I need to pay and an addiction to Raid Shadow Legends I need to satisfy. I also just kind of like pissing all of you off with my opinion. It's gonna be so fun. So I figured, why not ruin what little reputation I already have and talk about another movie I think is disappointing.
I'm gonna be rational. I'm gonna be rational.
You know what we're here to talk about. It's the big rad lizard lad. The deadbeat monster dad. Our favorite reptile from Stalingrad. We're talking about Godzilla. The one. So, I know what you're thinking. Which is, okay, but why though?
A dab.
Well, first of all, my watch time is dying. And second of all, this movie is half a decade old. Meaning that when I first watched this movie, I was 15 years old. I am now 21 years old and have a severe physical and mental addiction to alcohol. What was I talking about? So why not compare my thoughts from all those years ago to the ones I have now? It's probably my fourth or so time watching it, so why not? By the way, I know what else you're thinking. How am I supposed to remember my thoughts on a movie from over 5 years ago? Well, you stupid dingus, if you stop interrupting me, I'd tell you. You see, I've been doing this whole embarrassing myself online thing for over 10 years at this point. Many years ago, I used to have another channel where I posted Minecraft trolling videos, and the exact review it is that I'm looking for. Of course, it's every bit the tour de force you'd expect a 15-year-old to make. So we're not even going to try and put up with that. Instead, I went through the long and extremely painful process of inserting an entire Adderall pill up my urethra and then trying to watch this without strangling myself. I was barely able to get all of the critiques into this handy little list I made here. There are some game-changing notes in here like, pretty interesting amount of actors, pretty good amount of actors.
Pretty interesting amount of actors, pretty good amount of actors.
How about that time I take to mention that Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla isn't very good?
Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla, which, I mean, that's not a very good movie.
And who could forget the ever so nuanced analysis of how much we want Godzilla to destroy stuff?
Destroying.
I'm very clearly disappointed with the movie throughout. Hell, I'm pretty sure I say it's not good at some points.
I didn't really like it.
I still ended up giving this a 7.5 out of 10. Guess that's what happens when your old favorite YouTuber gives it a 7 out of 10 and you want to be just like him. Oops. Well, here's the $1 million question. What do I think about it now? I still think it's pretty mediocre, to be honest. Oh no! Did I make the little babies cry? I feel like there's a lot here that could have blossomed into something a lot more meaningful, impactful, and memorable. Instead, we just got a whole bunch of moments where I was just like, yeah, okay. Now, don't get me wrong. There's a lot I appreciate about this movie. In fact, I enjoyed the movie a lot more this time around. Still, that doesn't mean I wasn't picking up my phone every few minutes to look at funny pictures on the internet. This one's my favorite. I could do what I usually do and give you a plot synopsis, but nobody wants that. Besides, I'm pretty sure you've probably already seen it. And if you haven't, I'm honestly not sure what you're even doing here. Maybe you're that one guy that left "Remember Nanking" literally dozens of times in my comments section. If you are, I love you. The story of this movie is pretty weird because it starts off as this big drama with lots of exciting characters and plot threads that seem destined to blossom into an eventual epic and emotional conclusion. And then they decide, nah, actually let's not do that. The only plus it really has going on for it is the big lovable sponge cake we all came to see in the first place. Aside from that, if you're asking me, and I know you're not, this movie is at its finest when Bryan Cranston is on screen. Not only because he's definitely the strongest actor of the bunch, but because his character actually has things he's clearly fighting for throughout the plot. We've got a husband that wants to avenge his wife after being lost to catastrophe. He's full of passion and rage, and he wants to know the truth of what happened on that fateful day at that power plant, despite what feels like the world against him as he tries to uncover it all. You feel a lot for this character that's on screen for less than half of the runtime, and yet, he's not even our main character. No, that honor would go to his son, who has about as much personality as a loaf of bread. I honestly could not be less invested in him if I tried. And I've had the same opinion for 5 years too. I call him, and everybody else for that matter, flat and one-dimensional. Which, I mean, yeah. If it tells you anything, despite having watched this who knows how many times at this point, I still had to look up all the character names for this review. I guess that tells you just how memorable of a character somebody like Ford Brody is. Only, I feel like I noticed something this time around that I think explained why I feel so little for him. A lot of people are quick to point to the actor himself. That Aaron guy, he's alright with the right stuff. Check him out in Nocturnal Animals if you want to see both the receipts and the depression. I actually feel like it's this military angle that really kills him for me. Now, before I get called a libtard by a bunch of troglodytes in the comment section, let me explain. What I mean to say is that once we get the army involved, everything suddenly feels a lot more cold and distant. At least to me anyway, and we all know how much my opinion is worth. In honesty, it never feels like Ford Brody is fighting for his father or his barely developed family. Instead, it just kind of feels like he's fighting for no reason. Problem with that is that when you have a generic character that doesn't feel like he's fighting for anything, how am I supposed to invest in that? It doesn't help that this new setting they place him in is an even more underdeveloped group. One that really just exists to be cannon fodder. And because of that, I don't think it's surprising when all I see in him is another generic loaf of bread that feels like he's really only there to keep the plot moving along. Now hear me out. There's an idea that I've carried with me ever since I was 15. One that I personally think really would have made this movie a lot more interesting. Trust me, this one is not as bad as my other ideas. Instead of killing Bryan Cranston's character halfway, I personally would have really liked if they saved him for the ending. The scene where Ford Brody is with the nuke on a boat would have been the perfect moment for Bryan Cranston to have swooped in, saved his son, and taken his place. You know, kind of completing his arc and being able to save his family when he couldn't before? I don't know, I think that sounds pretty good. At least it means we'd have a character we could actually latch onto. Speaking about characters we genuinely like, how about we talk about everybody's favorite monster? The Mutos. Yay! You know, I actually don't have much against these guys. I like their ferocity. They're nasty and they've got a pretty sleek design. The one problem I think I do have with them is that they're just kind of stupid. I mean, what I mean to say is that they lack any real standout features, or what little they do have just seems like a bit much. For example, the fact that they can EMP their surroundings is a bit ridiculous. I know I'm talking logistics in a movie where giant monsters fight each other and an entire city is nuked, but there's not a lot of method to that madness, you know? This is easier said having the hindsight of King of the Monsters, but just think about how all those monsters have their own little quirks that make them stand out. Kevin is a prime example of this. And who doesn't love Kevin? Wouldn't you have liked to see a monster with character like Kevin in this movie? I think it really would have stepped it up. Now, for those of you that are not aware, the stunt I'm pulling here is called exaggeration. I know it's a new concept for some of you. Still, I thought I'd spare myself from the comments I'm probably still gonna get about how much of an idiot I am and how I should stop making videos. But, that's gonna happen anyway. I just think it'd be nice to have something that made them memorable. I really like the little interactions the two Mutos had with each other. Them engaging like a bitter old married couple was the closest thing to personality we got from them. So when that's probably the most they've got, they feel like they're right around the same level with Megaguirus and Orga in the pretty generic monster tier. And in case you were curious, Gabra is at the very top of that tier list. Speaking of terrible segues, I actually think that this Godzilla is one of the best to ever be put on screen. I know, something positive for once. Not only is it an imposing looking special effect, but it also has this degree of gravitas and real world weight. One that really commands your attention whenever he's on screen. It also helps that the film is often shot in a way that presents him from human perspectives, really grounding the camera and making any appearance feel grand in scale. This might not be the most gigantic Godzilla ever made. We've got Godzilla Earth to thank for robbing that title, but he's probably the most impactful. I love how carefully put together most of the decisions felt with how to approach this monster especially. For example, the decision to not let the Big G use his atomic breath until the end fight was a great idea. It created this payoff that definitely ranks highly in my favorite moments from the Monsterverse, and even the entire franchise as a whole. I like how they present him as this absolute force of nature that man doesn't even dare to try and control. Well, except for maybe the point where they all start shooting at him because, oh my god, that thing is walking at you. I respect Gareth Edwards for knowing how to hold back and build suspense throughout this entire movie. That being said, I guess now would be a good time to talk about the proverbial elephant in the room. And by that, I mean the pretty annoying aspect of Godzilla popping in and then disappearing from our screens like the film version of a hemorrhoid. So from my understandings, the approach that was attempted here was something of a Jaws approach, to show as little of the monster as possible to maximize suspense and anticipation. You can see elements of this in things like the score that has a substantial buildup of tension, just like the Jaws theme. Quite honestly, it's one of my favorite Godzilla themes. It's no Persecution of the Masses, that's for sure, but it's definitely up there. That little tangent aside, I like the approach itself, it just doesn't really work, does it? It really just feels like we're kind of being robbed of the screen time we want to see. And I don't worry about saying that critique because I know it's a widespread complaint. Even though I think this does do some damage to the overall package, it's one of very few things I can really discount from Godzilla here. For the more serious action thriller vibe they've got going on here, they probably made as good of a Godzilla as they were going to get. So thank you to everybody behind this monster for not butchering him like some other schmuck did. Now with the obligatory crapping of Godzilla 1998 out of the way, I think we should bring this to a close and get to my final thoughts. So over the last 5 years, my thoughts on this movie just keep changing. At first, I was massively disappointed with the direction they were taking because 15-year-old Justin never heard of this little thing called subtlety. Although in fairness, it is easy to say that when you've got hindsight on your side. Once I started to mature and accept it for the film it is instead of the film I wanted it to be, I think I really started to get more of an appreciation for it. Even just looking back on my notes that I took during this viewing, I feel like there was a lot more intrigue going on. Even so, some things never change. Possibly my favorite note here is, Aaron's character pulling out the pistol on the Muto is the stupidest thing. I dare you to challenge me on that. I dare you! At the end of the day, it's still a disappointing movie for me. Extremely disappointing, even. With that said though, that doesn't mean that it doesn't have those great moments that left me starstruck and mesmerized. Again, I just love the look and feel of this giant blubbering oaf here. And I think it's good enough of a launching pad for the Monsterverse to start from. If you ask me, there are some issues with the Monsterverse map as is, but that's a discussion for another time. So is Godzilla 2014 worth your time? If you're a big Godzilla fan, I say sure. If you're a casual moviegoer, that answer becomes a lot less definite. And if you're anybody else, I'd say to probably just skip out on it. The plot really isn't all that compelling, only one character is particularly likable, and he dies off too quickly. There's plenty of room for improvement, and thinking about what could have been makes it that much more challenging to watch. Funny enough, it feels like every Godzilla movie I've talked about so far has received a pretty adverse reaction from me despite liking the thing so much. Maybe it's because I know that there's better with movies like the original and Shin. Perhaps it's because I know that this entire universe is built on greed and not a real passion for the monsters involved, which, funny enough, is what the original franchise did. And you know what? That's okay. Just like I say with every other movie I step on, it's only my opinion. And if you're one of those people that finds themselves enjoying this movie more than I do, then I'm happy for you. You found qualities in it that I couldn't, and I only see that as a good thing. Still, I'm sure that most of the people I'm saying this for have already left an okay boomer in the comment section. Again, for those of you that didn't agree with me and stuck around until the very end, thank you for hearing me out. You know, if you want to let me know that you stuck around, how about throwing a comment saying, "Remember Nanking" down below, eh? that would be much appreciated. Thank you all for watching, and I'll be back in 6 months to talk about a video about my Uncle Jamal and his unsavory love for getting cactus balls slingshotted directly into his rectum. Until then, I'll see you all later. Give me money.
Cause I am the baddest of them all. If you ain't about money, then I don't mess with y'all. Y'all think I don't get girls, cause I'm very tall. If she sees my stacks, I bet you that she calls. You know that I am the baddest of them all. If you ain't about money, then I don't mess with y'all. Y'all think I don't get girls, cause I'm very tall.